You're listening to On Mission with Dr. Matt Davis, a podcast designed to explore the personal mission of everyday leaders. Hear from men and women who are making a difference in their corner of the world and discover what keeps them on mission. Welcome to On Mission. I am Matt Davis. Our guest today is MBU alumnus Randy Tanis, also more frequently known as PR. And not just any alumnus, he is the reigning Alumnus of the Year, with all the rights and privileges appertaining thereto. He is the currently crowned king of the alumni. And I don't know what exactly the rights and privileges are of that, but there was a nice plaque and a great speech that was made. And so we are celebrating that all year long, I'm sure, with festivities at your house. Yeah, right. Your kids greet you in a special way now. He has been the camp director at Camp Chetek in Chetek, Wisconsin for the past 20 years, faithfully serving in that role. And before that, from 1983 until 2004, he was the youth pastor at Calvary Baptist Church right here in Watertown, Wisconsin. He and his wife, Laurel, are also a Maranatha alum. I guess she could be considered the co-alumnus of the year. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure she's already mentioned that to you, but Laurel is a great asset to ministry as well, a great partner, and they have 6 children and 14 grandchildren. That would be Micah, married to Renee with 4 children. That would be Matthew, married to Julie with 3 children, if I got that right. Mark, married to Rachel with 4 children. Luke, married to Anna. I thought I had that right. Yep. And they are the ones in Malta, right? Yep. Long way away. Yes. Oh, boy. And have you been to see them yet? Because Malta is awesome, right? Okay, we'll get into that. And they have 3 children. Then there's Marissa. And then there's Mitchell, married to Dylan, which that must be a new development.
That was in May.
Okay. All right. Very good. He enjoys watching football games, golfing with friends, playing football with his family, and spending time with the grandchildren. Obviously, that's a full-time deal. His favorite meal is, of course, steak, just with whatever. I mean, who wouldn't say that? And his favorite sports teams are blah, 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 Michigan football, national champions, whatever, and the Green Bay Packers, whatever. All right, Pastor Tanis, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, great. Great to be here.
Hey, so we know each other pretty well. You are here all the time on campus, and I've had the opportunity to be to Camp Chetek many times. Of course, for me growing up, my biggest connection to Camp Chetek was my dad, who spoke at Camp Chetek, it seems like every summer, and made that pilgrimage up there. And you get the benefit of some great speakers to come through camp every single year. That's kind of a neat perk of being a camp director, isn't it?
In fact, your dad was the one that did our training my first summer, 2004.
Really?
And he was there. In fact, I told him Sunday night that the first message he did to our staff, it's not about me, it's all about God.
Yeah.
And I developed that message some and preached it at the youth conference on Saturday. But he was a huge blessing. And then he did junior weeks several times for us. And, he loved the juniors and preaching the gospel.
Well, mainly because you can just be a crazy person, and and you're speaking to juniors. He kind of let it all loose. They did the crazy things. He's a youth pastor at heart as well. I think that's something you guys have in common. Sort of a lifelong youth pastor. And I'm just thinking about, and I want to definitely talk to you and delve into this in our episode today about the connection that you've had with, in particular, teens and college-age young people. Really, your whole ministry has been focused in that arena, in that direction. I definitely want to explore that a little bit today. Okay. And, I don't know why you're a Packers fan, only that you've just ever been
my wife
surrounded by that your whole life. They sort of beat you into submission, in this state. It hasn't happened to me yet, but I'm getting
You're
there.
that Bears fan, but you don't go Bears.
But the Bears don't give you any reasons to like them. I mean, don't get me wrong. But, we enjoy that. And I love seeing you on campus, and you always have a pretty big following from camp staff, former camp staff, and students that you're recruiting. And then for a lot of years, it was just your own kids as friends, right? I mean,
that was a big help.
You had a kid here at Maranatha for like how many years? Because they all came here. So, I mean, it had to have been.
Micah started in 2002, and then we left in 2004. All the way to like 14.
Yeah, that was a lot of A lot of school bills being paid
remind me
for
about
those years. I hope you're not still paying.
No.
But they were great students here and very involved, and so that was probably a nice recruitment pull for you too while it lasted, right?
Yes.
But Camp Chetek is one of the most important partners that we have at Maranatha because we need each other, and we're very appreciative of the outlet for ministry for our students during the summer to kind of continue on with their training pickup in such a consistent and reliable way. And then obviously for the camp, that's an important relationship for recruitment of camp staff, which is a never-ending job, isn't it? How you doing this year so far?
Actually, this is, in 20 years of doing this, we're farther along than we've ever been.
Is that right?
In fact, normally at this point, I have to go visit some other schools and stuff, but of our 65 contracts, we actually have 63 signed contracts.
Wow, that's like unheard of.
Yeah, 24 for Maranatha. So
24.
I'm excited.
Praise the Lord.
So this year, rather than do an ice cream social to get some more people, I offered them all a coupon for a free drink in the Old Main Cafe if they came and met our new program director, which just arrived on Monday.
Oh, who is it?
Pastor Stuart Wiest.
Okay.
He actually...
Now, Wiest, that sounds like a faith name.
No.
Because I'm always doing the live stream announcing. Okay. I see those names on the rosters. Where's he from?
Minnesota, Preston, Minnesota. Yeah. Pastored there for 9 years. He is also in seminary with some of my boys.
Oh, okay.
And he's been coming to camp for the last probably 6 or 7 summers during teen weeks. He's a captain, so he would drive our take the sailboat out, give sailboat rides.
Oh, okay.
And in a small church, about 50 people, but he'd bring close to 50 campers from the community. So he's been very, very active in camp, and he contacted me as he knew we were looking, and God directed him there, and we're excited that he'll be joining us officially. He actually recruited Monday and Tuesday with me.
Okay.
And then they'll be moving up to Chetek in March. So we're excited to have a new program director.
That's a big change in direction then for him too. Wow. Chetek is an interesting area. Obviously I associated almost 100% with the camp as being pretty much the only thing going on, but it's actually more of a touristy kind of an area. Can you describe
We're located on it's called a chain of lakes. So there's 6 lakes. You can go literally almost 10 miles on the lakes in several directions. And then, with the population a little over 2,000 to 3,000 normal, it will swell to 8,000 to 10,000 in the summertime, especially the week of 4th of July, because there's cabins all over the lakes. And as we went there, people would say, "Oh yeah, I've been to Chetek. We'd go fishing up there." And so a lot of tourism. When we first got there, they made it very clear there's no McDonald's in town, and
there's we don't that diner on the corner.
Yeah,
I think you got a Quick Trip. I'm sure.
Yeah, we do have a Quick Trip, 24/7. Grocery store closes at 8, but there is a Dairy Queen. Okay,
no Culver's.
No Culver's.
Oh wow,
no. Got to go to Rice Lake for that. So
of course, everything. Rice Lake is the big city. There's a Walmart,
Menards. They put a Hobby Lobby in. That was answered my wife's prayer.
Nice.
She prayed for that to come to time. So
she's a prayer warrior.
She got her Hobby Lobby and her Kohl's.
Wow. Okay. I heard they're having a sale.
They always have a sale.
So you got all the Wisconsin classics there between Kohl's and Culver's and Quick Trip. You're covered pretty well. So the camp has been there how long? You're like, I don't know how many camp directors there have been over the years, but I know Mike Duffy was there ahead of you. And
the camp board incorporated in 1925. So what they did in those days is they used several different camp facilities to facilitate camp. They were using the facility we're at now is owned by the Presbyterians. Oh. And so as the Baptists rented it, there became more Baptists than Presbyterians. So 1944, they raised the money and they purchased the property from the Presbyterians. So 1944 is the date I look at as incorporating this Camp Chetek.
Okay.
So last year we celebrated 80 years at the camp. Chapel was built in 1946, so a couple years into it. We spent $8,000 they raised over a year and a half to build the chapel. And
8,000?
8,000.
Oh, wow.
And that's been there for all those years. And the Lord allowed us to build a new, we call it a chapel complex now, which is like a gymnasium but functions as our chapel. Mm-hmm. And that was a little more than $8,000.
Yeah. Well, and it took a little less time, though. I think it only took a couple of years.
Well,
to put it up
we broke ground in 2019, our 75th anniversary. And then that thing, COVID, hit.
Oh, yeah.
So we put all of our energies actually into the foundation work that summer because we weren't able to have camp, and completed it. So we've been able to use it for 2 years now, and so it's been really neat to see.
Probably just not the same, though.
No.
Not the same. You're not in the, you don't have the bugs flying in.
Yeah.
And all.
It's actually
nice features.
Air conditioned. You have bathrooms in the facility. So it's been very neat to see.
What's the current building project? Pastor mentioned it in church on Sunday.
The Lord has provided the funding for the complex, so it's paid for.
Yep.
And so, since we've been there, the girls' bathhouse has been the thing that with all the seniors, I do a special senior breakfast the last day and ask them what's good and what's bad, and it's always the girls' bathhouse. It's bad.
Perpetually on the list.
Yeah, built in the 70s. In fact, my wife was a camper when it was built, and she said that was a huge upgrade from the old place.
She always told the senior, "You don't know how good you have it."
So board voted for us to start raising the money for that, and our goal is Kip thinks it's going to be about $500,000.
Whoa!
And Kip is our general. Kip Melmanger, graduate here of Maranatha as well, been with us for 20 years. He's also the general contractor, and so we'll contract some of the work, and then he'll do a lot of it with crews, volunteer crews. But our goal is we finish August 2nd. We have one more rental the next week. So August 9th is the plan to take the building down. We got to use the same footprint because of all kinds of restrictions up there.
Close. Yeah.
So the goal would be to get it down and back up in 9 months so it's ready to go for
So this would be the last summer that any of those female campers could have an opportunity to be part of that legacy, right? They can say, and
part of the new complex is the boys' bathhouse. And so, of course, the boys have really enjoyed this brand new bathhouse.
Oh, so your chapel building doubles as the men's bathhouse as well?
And
they're missing out then.
Yeah,
on
and
the
campgrounds, and so that's where we got a coffee shop and a bookstore that's actually now open all year round. Before it was just, in the summertime.
You guys are going high tech. Next thing you'll have Wi-Fi.
Oh, we do.
What?
And it works pretty consistently too. Okay.
Unbelievable. Oh my goodness. Well, before we get too far into the conversation, this is the On Mission podcast, so I got to hit you with a deep question.
Okay.
And that is, PR, what is your mission in life?
It's interesting. Sunday night, I got to be at Calvary Baptist Church. They're having their 65th anniversary celebration throughout the year, inviting some former staff. And I shared with the people there, I started out as youth pastor and going in there. And, of course, I came to Maranatha to play football, baseball. So I thought everything was athletics. But it was at a youth conference, youth leadership conference, and they challenged us, what is your purpose? And came back from that, and the Lord gave me a passage in 2 Timothy 3:15, 16, 17. And basically, it talks in that thou hast known from a child, thou hast known the Holy Scriptures. And so my goal has been to see people saved. And then verse 16 talks about all Scriptures given by inspiration of God for profitable, for doctrine, reproof, for correction, instruction, and righteousness. So to teach people the Scriptures. And then verse 17, that the man of God or child of God may be perfect or thoroughly furnished in all good works. And from that, the goal of serving. And so my philosophy from my second year as a youth pastor was to see people saved, teach them the Scripture, and then prepare them to serve. And that revolutionized our youth group here in Watertown. And so everything we did then for youth activities was about serving. And so I was teaching people to serve. My goal was, as a youth pastor, if I could teach these high school kids how to serve, as teenagers. It will impact them the rest of their life. As a result, we had the privilege to go on 17 mission trips. Wow. Our first one was to Sturgeon Bay. I think we took 13 teenagers up there. We stayed at the Jellystone campground in tents.
Oh, boy.
Drove into the church, a little Peninsula Baptist Church, and did a Bible school for them. And because when I was in college, kind of started this whole thing, I traveled 3 summers of neighborhood Bible time.
Okay.
Brother Homsher was the director, and that kind of shaped my desire to work with young people. And so he allowed us to do an actual Bible time in this little church. And the first couple years, coming off the circuit, I thought I needed to do rally time and, do all the teaching and so forth. And,
right.
But by our third time there, we went 3 years in a row, I felt like I needed to teach the teenagers how to do it.
Oh, really?
And
that's a little nerve-wracking.
Yeah, it was, because all of a sudden I'm watching them, do the promotion. They're doing the stories. And I remember John Getch, evangelist John Getch, was living in Watertown, grew up in Watertown. So he was back in Watertown. So his son, John Jr., was in the youth group. And he and the Redberg boys, and so I was teaching them to do it. But on Thursday night, we did a youth rally. Went to the park with a big ball, and I let John preach. And I'll never forget, as he preached, the response of a couple kids getting saved.
Wow.
And the excitement of him, as a teenager. And that kind of revolutionized everything that I tried to do with all the rest of our mission trips, was take the kids out, help them serve, let them see that. Through the contacts, being in Watertown, a lot of different people would come through visiting. Yeah. And someone introduced me to the ministry in Hermosillo. Basilio Alfaro was the missionary there. And he said, actually it was Chuck Phelps. He told me about him. So we arranged to take a mission trip to Hermosillo, Mexico.
Oh, boy.
1989. 33 of us flew into...
33?
We flew into Hermosillo, the roughest airplane I've ever been on, up and down. You get the mountains, and then you have the heat there, and you're up and down, and kids get off the plane, and they're like kissing the ground. It's like, we are here. And But Chuck Phelps had given me good advice. He said, now you're in Mexico. They do things different in Mexico. It's a different schedule, and your schedule, time is not that important. But what it did is we got to see the kids go out and see. We went into the villages around Hermosillo. And some of those villages is just amazing to see. No cars, no electricity, and so the kids really got to see what life was like. And then it was kind of neat. There's a village there called Nuevo Hermosillo. And basically the Ford company set up a plant, and so they set up this whole village for, the employees, the Mexicans there. And so we went there, and we the Budaws were with us, Dr. and Mrs. Budaw, and of course Seth and Hope were in the youth group then. And so we took the instruments, the brass instruments, and we'd play a little concert and then draw the crowd in. And then we'd take the bus and we'd put a sheet over top of the bus. And then with a projector, we'd show a film.
Oh, fancy.
In Spanish.
Yeah, okay.
So, of course, what we did as the group, we just prayed because we couldn't understand anything going on. But that night, the kids got to see 33 people get saved.
Wow.
And something I've never forgotten. And so as a result, they started a Bible study there, and that was neat. So we kept in contact with them, and then the goal was to go to Mexico every 4 years, so everybody in the senior high would get to go one time. So we went back in 94, and went again to Nuevo Hermosillo, did the same thing, and that time we saw 55 people get saved.
Wow.
It's the most people I've ever seen in one time. And so as a result, it went from a Bible study where they actually started a church. And so that was neat to hear about. And then when we went in 98, 4 years later, we actually took some of the teenagers and we went out and helped lay brick for the actual church building.
A building.
They were doing a building. And then our final trip of 2004, that was as I was transitioning to camp, but I still came back to do a mission trip. And so that year, I got to preach in the church building. So I got to see the progression over all those years. Teenagers each got to see a little part of it. But, I think the Mexico trip was something where the kids really got to see how blessed we are in America and what we don't have there. And so many of those kids, have a desire to serve. And so those were neat trips. And,
the first mission trip I led was to the Philippines.
Okay.
Not to, we didn't do a trial run, to Sturgeon Bay or whatever. So Dana and I, and that was the first time I'd ever traveled internationally either. And we were the leaders, and we were the only leaders of that group. And so we had, 9 or 10, and all my kids. So it took all 3 of the boys, and they were in high school. And so that was an adventure, but it was a very much like yours, an evangelistic focused mission trip where we had opportunity to give the gospel in public schools. Several of the young people from Maranatha on our team said to us as we were preparing during that semester that they had never personally led someone to the Lord. They had shared the gospel faithfully as God gave them opportunities here in the States, but they'd never actually been able to see someone accept Christ from their personal testimony. Well, of course, every single one of them was able not only to lead one person, but dozens to the Lord throughout that trip. But I remember the first night, one of the young ladies stood up as we were having dinner and giving testimonies of what we'd seen that day. And she said, today I was able to lead the first person I ever saw. And what a life-changing thing that is, to go from being a good person, or even a good Christian, but not necessarily a soul-winning Christian, to somebody who actually sees God use their testimony in that way. That's something that that's a revolutionary step in your Christian walk, almost on par with baptism. We talk about the first step of obedience. Well, what about the second step of obedience, which is pretty clearly you, Matt Davis, need to be sharing the gospel personally with other people. And so trips like that take a young person who, a lot of those kids are growing up in good homes, right? Maybe they're parents were like the Boodalls, faculty, staff at Maranatha, good kids, but had they ever really had the opportunity to step out of that bubble? So a mission trip is huge for that. Counseling at camp, another huge way to do that, right? Yeah. So talk a little bit about your ministry to young people and that kind of college age, teenage years, as they transition from teen into the college age. I've seen what a profound step that is in a person's development. You have a lot of familiarity from your perspective over now 40 years of ministry to see how critical that is, not just for that particular stage in life, but for the rest of their life. I mean, think about it. Okay, I don't want to make you feel old, but
I am.
The Boodalls' grandkids are here as students. And so you're talking multiple generations impacted through your ministry as a youth pastor. And you've seen them now not only leave and go into life, but their lives have developed, and now they have kids that are also making good decisions for the Lord. So what is your reflection on that age group and kind of what makes that such a pivotal time of life?
It was unique being youth pastor here in Watertown.
Of course.
Because I had access to a lot of college kids. And so we had our youth group divided into junior high and senior high. And so I had a junior high youth staff and a senior high youth staff. And in fact, I was looking through notes a couple months ago, and because I was telling somebody, I said, I have a pretty large youth staff. And I looked through my notes, and I had 40 on our youth staff when I was here in Watertown. 40.
At the same time?
Yeah, between junior high youth staff and senior
That's
high.
That's a lot of staff.
Yeah, I know. But I look back now, those were college-age kids that I was training and preparing them for ministry. I always said if anybody would be willing to work with me and do the junior high youth group and do it well, they could go anywhere in life and be in ministry.
The Marines, you could do just about anything.
Tom Loggins pastors over in Milwaukee, and he was one of our junior high youth leaders. And but so that, I look back now in preparation for being at camp. They didn't have a camp program. Was at Maranatha,
No.
But recognizing now all of the training I did with the college kids there, the highlight, I shared this in church Sunday, the highlight, or last night at church at Lake Mills, to me the highlight of being at camp is bringing the 65 college kids in, 2 weeks of very intense training, 8 weeks of service. So for 10 weeks we get to see their lives transformed. Because they're putting their lives out there to serve. I ask every summer, at the end of the summer, how many of you led your first person to Christ this summer? And probably every summer it's 10 to 12 kids have that privilege of doing that. Same thing in the youth group. That was our goal, all of our mission trips, especially doing Bible schools at different places. You know, I would train them, teach them, and that was their goal, to lead someone to Christ. Because just like teaching them to serve, if they get to experience leading someone to Christ, they may never get over it, that excitement and joy.
Well, you hope not.
Yeah. And so just, allowing the Lord to help me be here in Watertown, working with the college kids, now at camp. It's our primary ministry is bringing the college kids in. In fact, Pastor Stewart, I asked him the question, I said, why would you want to leave a pastorate to come work at camp? And he said to me, because I love what you guys do with discipling these kids and mentoring these kids. And I just think that's a great opportunity to impact these kids at that age of their life. And so that's kind of neat to see.
I've heard you say before, and it surprised me when the first time I heard it, and I've seen it now that you were 100% correct in making this decision, but I've heard you say before that your primary focus as a director is really on discipling the college-age young people that come, because obviously the campers are a lot of the focus of camp. That's the reason we have camp. But the campers come in for a week. And maybe they come back for a second week, if they behave, right?
Yes.
they got to behave. But maybe you get them 3 days and then a week or whatever. You get the team, the preteens that come in or whatever that help out for a few
3
weeks.
weeks. Yeah, 3 week program.
In that program. But you've got the camp staff there the whole summer to really disciple them for not just being effective here at camp, but for life. And, that really hit me when you told me that many years ago now, that was really your focus and primary discipleship outlet.
I tell them as we go into training, and we do kind of unique. We do 2 full weeks of training. Some camps, just because of schedule, only do a week, but we spend a lot of emphasis.
1 week and go.
Yeah. But I tell the kids as we go into it, I feel like we're training you for life in ministry.
Yeah.
A lot of them are going to go on to ministry. It's really neat over the years to see. I've had at least 4 or 5 kids. I remember one boy came from, he was a student down at Bob Jones, and he was a music major. And he was a counselor that summer. And the end of the summer, he goes, I'm going to be a youth pastor. And today is a youth pastor.
Praise
so
the Lord.
just from investing in those kids. And another young man, I remember Ryan. In fact, I went to college with his dad, Ron Scott, and his son Ryan was there. And he, too, changed to be a youth pastor after being there for the summer. And now today is still a youth pastor. So that's neat for me to see these kids, come, invest, and God, changes their hearts. And all of a sudden now I want to go back and pursue ministry. And that's so exciting for me. One of the joys I've had, being a youth pastor for 21 years in the same place, a lot of kids get through the ministry, but every year now for 20 years, either the pastor or evangelist or a missionary, and we have a missionary every week that comes to camp. So one of the others every summer has, at least one of them has been from the youth group in Watertown.
Is that right?
Yeah. And so
what a legacy.
So it's neat to see kids that was your youth pastor. In fact, 3 of our staff members are former teenagers. Kip and Ben were both in the youth group, and Betsy were teenagers in the youth group here in Watertown. Now they're on staff with me, so they've got stuck with me for years.
Well, Tim McPhillips was in your youth group a couple of years,
and we won't go there.
I have a feeling he might have been a thorn in your side the whole time. Like he's a thorn in my. No, he's not. But he was at church on Sunday when you gave your testimony and talked through the years there at Calvary. Your ministry was there, and that was kind of the focus of that. And he said, yeah, it was like getting a flashback. He said it was just like the old days. But what a neat thing. My dad has that experience, a long-time youth pastor. Your commitment to discipling young people is evident from the longevity of sticking with that particular job, which is a job that not a lot of people stay with for very long. The average tenure of a youth pastor is only a couple of years.
18 months now.
Yeah. Oh, really? Less than 2. Okay, great. Well, that's not enough time. I mean, a young person has trust issues when there's a constant turnover of youth pastors, and what a blessing to have someone dedicated to that, to say, hey, I'm here for the long term, and this is real, and I want to get to know you and establish that. That's absolutely life-changing. And you demonstrated that commitment. You haven't been a senior pastor. Some guys view the youth pastorate as like a stepping stone to becoming a senior pastor. And I thought it was interesting. I did not know what you said on Sunday about the fact that was a discussion at the end of Pastor Lincoln's term, and he saw things coming to a close there, and then you'd been there for 20 years, and he says, okay, PR, is it your turn? You want to consider doing this? I'm sure you had to give it some consideration.
Yeah, 6 months.
You can't help but just say, okay, yeah, I definitely need to take this seriously. But then you ultimately said, no, I think I'm just going to stay here in my role as a youth pastor. What went into that? You just said 6 months, so you must have given it some serious thought.
I trained at Maranatha. Well, I came to play football, a spiritual reason, but Jerry Savinsky was preaching, and I surrendered to stay. And with Dr. Cedarholm, everybody, I'm going to be a preacher boy, so I studied to be a pastor.
I think that was like the only major at that time. Yeah.
But it was the 3 summers of Bible time that I think the Lord gave me a great desire to work with youth. And I look now, I believe it's a gift, the fact that 42 years later I'm still working with young people. But that was, interesting, because people would say to me, when you can get a real job? I said, I got a real job. I get to work with young people, and never felt like I had to be a pastor to be fulfilled. I loved the youth. I got to preach to them, teach, work with them. And so when Pastor Lincoln approached me, it was probably year about 17. So it wasn't, and he had a 3-year plan, and we'd be co-pastors, and we prayed about it. And I walked into his office one day. I said, Pastor, I have no desire to do this. And part of it was, I think, because I was doing so much. I mean, I was in charge of King's Kids. I was in charge of the bus ministry, in charge of visitation, probably a little bit too much. And so it's like, how could I be the pastor too? Well, you couldn't have been. But God just didn't give me any desire. And, I just loved doing what I was doing. When Pastor Loggins came, of course, he's my brother-in-law, so now I'm working for my brother-in-law, which was great. And so he kind of restructured my ministry. We brought some more staff in, and so it was during that time that God really began to say, you know what, maybe there is something else. I didn't really seek it. Brother Homsher wanted me to take over Bible time, and so he approached me about that, and I said, no, I just don't believe that's what God wants. I had a church pursue me, and Pastor Loggins' philosophy was, if God opens a door, you need to pray about it.
Yeah.
And so I pursued that church, didn't let anybody know because I didn't want to go, and God closed that door, and we just continued. And then when Camp contacted me, of course, it took a lot to get me to stay in Watertown. Once I was here, we loved it. All 6 kids born here in this area, all going to the Christian schools. And so when Camp contacted me, it's like, I don't go to camp.
Yeah.
But God made it very clear through counsel and talking with people, and directed us there. And just thankful that He has done that, and it's neat to see how He directs your path. And
well, you were finally somewhere comfortable, in the sense that it was familiar enough, the status quo. You got your place kind of how you like it.
Yeah.
People ask me, do you like to go out on the weekend and explore and stuff? I said, No, I worked hard to get this set up the way I like it. My chair fits right. I got it, the TV.
I planned that whole youth room. It's got closets all along the back wall, and so we can put all the stuff there.
Beautiful. And you didn't get to enjoy it for very long, did you?
No, I never did
at all. Even. Yeah, but. Well, you passed along to the rest of us. Yes. We've enjoyed it. My boys all came through that youth group, and you established the foundation for it. If you think about the extended legacy, by the way, not just even while you were there, but it's comfortable. You know the rhythms and the routines. That's not the easiest position to be in, youth pastor at Calvary Baptist Church in Watertown, where Maranatha sits and where you do hop. I mean, you had some assets with the college students that were there to help. But, man, there's a lot of complexity, and I'm sure there were a lot of Friday night youth activities that, the academy got a rescheduled basketball game, and now we're not having this activity, where your conflicts and things like that I'm sure I've heard over the years, lots of, the politics of, wrestling between ministries and things like that. Okay, so you had all that figured out, and then an opportunity like Camp Chetek comes along, which I'm sure you had some passing familiarity with the ministry, camp, sending kids to camp and going up for a week here or there. But that would be a whole, starting over, right? Learning a new gig. It's a different job. It has different rhythms and different politics and different stresses. And I'm sure lots of stresses and financial and the unknowns. How did you get comfortable with the uncomfortable decision like that? With you moving your family, you got a lot of kids, you got all this, and they're all looking at you. Okay, I want to follow God's will for my life, and I think He's opening a store. Walk me through the process for that.
It's interesting because in January 15th of 2004, of course, the church is trying to sell the property over the old building, and we're in a parsonage. So they basically said, we're going to sell the parsonage. So either buy it or move. Well, we had 6 kids, no starter house, been there for 21 years in a parsonage. So we bought the parsonage from the church. January 15th, signed their life away, thinking, okay. And then I get a letter from Camp Chetek dated January 15th. I got it 3 days later and said, hey, would you consider being a camp director? And it's no, I just bought a house in town,
I'm not doing that.
Pretty much put it away. And of course, Pastor Terpstra was the acting interim director. He said, would you pray about it? Well, sure, I'll pray about it, and I began to pray about it. And I try to practice reading through the Bible. So I was reading in Psalm chapter 18 that week, and verse 12, I think it says, and He drew him out of many waters. Okay, Lord, I'm not leaving Watertown. You don't speak that directly, And it's okay. So I get to verse 30, and it says, as for God, His way is perfect. And it's just the Lord hit me, and actually I circled that verse, and I put Camp Chetek 2004, because I had to get to the place where it wasn't about me. It's what does God want? I mean, I sought advice from camp directors, and everybody said, you'll just know. I said, well, how will I know? It's how do I know this?
That's great advice.
And, I talked to Morris Gleiser, a good friend then, and because he had been in youth pastor, and then he became camp director, and then evangelism. And so he told me, he goes, Randy, he goes, you've had a great youth ministry there. Camp is a little different. You're going to go, you have kids for a week, so you see more kids saved, but you don't get to spend, years with them. Yeah. And, so seeking advice, and actually when we went up for the interview, my wife went with me, and of course she grew up going to the camp, so she loved the camp, and her mom was very concerned because the camp had gone into some financial difficulties. And so she goes, why would anybody go to this camp? So I didn't tell her mother-in-law I was going for an interview. But I got up there, and I remember thinking, I'm not coming here. I called Bob Loggins, my pastor, and said, why am I doing the interview? He goes, you're there, do the interview. So I met with 21 board members, And I very candidly told them everything that was wrong with the camp. I said, "This is why I don't bring teenagers here. This is because I wasn't, there was
really?
I took juniors, but teens, it was not meeting the needs. And I explained everything. This is what you need. And I said, okay, I've told this camp what they need to do. And I said, you need a more active board. You need all this kind of stuff. Walked away thinking, okay. And then they contacted me and said, we voted unanimously to have you as our director. It's like, okay.
Were they listening?
I don't know. And it's kind of neat because we honestly didn't feel like that's where we're going to go. And one board member contacted me. We were at the Quick Trip in Chetek about to come back to Watertown to say no. And he contacted me and he said, hey, Randy, could you come back out to camp? I just sensed you're uneasy about some things. And I was. And so we sat down and we talked for about a half hour. And the Lord used that one board member to just put a peace in my heart that this is what God has for us to do. Wow. On the way home, we called our children. Micah, our oldest, was in college then. And to our shock, they were all excited. I mean, they've all been in Watertown their whole life. But everybody except Mitchell. Mitchell was in second grade
oh, poor
because
guy.
We had just gotten this house, We're not going to move to another house, but... So it was neat to see that God took us there. I will admit the first couple of years, I had to go back to that verse several times. No,
Are
okay.
You sure?
Yeah, it's God's way. First year, of course, the board had...
That's where you had to get into the Hebrew. What does this word perfect actually mean?
I needed to. But I had circled it and said, I'm going. And the interesting thing, the Lord had used that same verse in 2 Timothy to lead us to Watertown.
Right.
So it's like, okay. So the first year we get there, the board had, budgeted and projected, and the numbers were way off.
Oh no!
And so they had taken a loan out for $250,000 before we got there, which I knew about. And then we're into about November, and I realize now we're going to be $50,000 short in this first year at camp. I'm thinking, oh great, come in as new director, everything's supposed to be great, and now what are we going to do? And you would understand this. So on December 8th, I get a letter from an attorney. Okay, and I'm thinking, oh, great. So I open up the letter, and it says, Dear Chetek Baptist Assembly, our corporate name, you're the recipient of some will money, so your check for $47,500 will be coming later this week.
Wow.
And so I went to the board, and I said, can we just, I hate doing this, but I said, can we just pay off so we make it through? That was December 8th. We watched that all the way to December 31st. December 31st, I opened the mail with a couple support checks, and we actually finished the year positive.
Wow.
And that was a real miracle. And then and then as I would go to churches, the big question is, well, how are you doing on the debt? Well, it's still got, $235,000. But one of our board members that was dying of cancer didn't want to change his will. And so he contacted me in January and said, Randy, I'm going to transfer some stock to camp. I want you to cash it in and put it towards the debt. So he transferred this stock, and for the first time in my life, I watched the stock market for like 3 or 4 days. And it was like, it was going up and down. I'm thinking, this is crazy. So I said, just cash this in.
Yeah.
And it was $165,000 towards the debt. And then a second portion of a will came in. And so within a year, and the Lord had taken care of the whole entire debt. And then we, were able to see some things go. The first couple years were pretty nip and tuck because the board was, they were conscious, okay, we don't want to go into any more debt. And so it was amazing to see God do some things in those years, bring money in a different way. He brought in a connection with a donor and his wife that fell in love with camp. In fact, I met with them down in Illinois, and they donated a fishing boat, about a $10,000 fishing boat to camp because they bought it to take kids out, and he's not doing it. Hey, could you guys need a fishing boat? I said, sure. So he donated the fishing boat to camp. Well, that was kind of like his...
Did you ask him, Can we pull tubers behind us?
we have. So with that donation to camp, that was kind of what got his interest in camp.
Yeah. And
now over 20 years, he's given substantial amounts of camp. He goes, that's the most expensive fishing boat I've ever had in my life.
For sure. But with the eternal rewards that go along with the faithfulness.
Well, he and his wife, they have been very business people, no children, and they feel like their life is being fulfilled through Camp Chetek. Sure. We talk about once a week.
And very real Bible on that.
And but it was neat to see. So within like the first 3 years, my goal was I'm going to camp, and we're going to have a 10% increase every year. From year 1 to year 2, we had increased 1 camper. Okay.
We're going in the right direction.
But then through process of time, some things happening, and then we got back up into the 1,600, which they had been at,
total campers in a year.
Yeah, for a summer. Wow. For a summer. And then we have rental weeks and so forth after that. And so
has that been pretty consistent, or have you been able to expand that capacity?
We got it from like the 900, got up to the 1,600, and we've kind of been staying there. We're down a little bit this past year, but I'm looking at the staff that God's already provided. I'm thinking, okay, does that mean we're going to have more campers coming? And
absolutely.
We're
right. You have the limitation of the facilities, right, but then you also have to have the staff to support it.
So we have a staff now that would support 240 campers. Okay. Which would be all of our cabins. We've had some weeks where we've hit 240, but never 240 every single week. So that's kind of a goal that we'd love to see and see God bring in. We have financially is very tough. So last year we had over $100,000 come in gifts to help with scholarships. Yeah. So people know that if you have some struggles, contact us. We're very simple with the program. We don't want kids not to come to camp because of money.
Yeah, I don't know how many times we've had that conversation it's great to have partners. It's not possible to do a ministry as large as that or as large as a Maranatha without people who have that same sort of heart and share it and then partner together and see it as a true partnership, that they're taking part in both the effort and willing to get behind that, and then also to honestly be able to stand before the Lord and take part in the reward for it as well. So that's incredible. And I'm sure the future is very bright for the camp, and it's got obviously a very good foundation now to continue to build on. You're a little bit landlocked. I wonder if there's any, strategic opportunities on the horizon.
Actually, when in 2004, they talked about selling some of the land. There's 125 acres. Okay. And so really landlocked, we have the main camp, the 25 acres, but there's 100 acres across the road. So,
is that right?
And it's just being farmed. We have a local farmer that leases the 40 acres from us. And but I'm so thankful the board opted not to sell, took out the loan, and that's been paid back. And so we have property that we could do some stuff out there with. So, that's a blessing. That future-wise, some of the camps have gone to where they can offer juniors and teens the same week, and that's a selling point. We may get there someday. I love the fact that our staff gets to be counselors to both juniors and teens. We work together as a unified staff, and it's not a bad thing. We changed it when I first got there. It was 3 weeks of juniors, 3 weeks of teens. Now we've changed it. Our first week is our most unique week. We have what's called inner city outreach. And so we raise about $40,000 to scholarship kids from the inner city of Minneapolis. They come for 4 days, Wednesday through Saturday, on purpose. And then if they respond to the gospel, they can come back for a full week of camp. So we start out with inner city, and then we go junior, teen, family, junior, teen, junior. So we have a variety. So the kids aren't all teens in a row, and so that's been very helpful. 2 years ago, we added a primary camp. It's 3 days. It's first, second, third grade. Wow. But it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So
overnight?
It's 2 nights overnight.
Oh my!
And honestly, it's gone well. We by that time of the summer, it's the last week of the summer. have a pretty good indication who's very good with younger kids, and so we put
Sure.
them as the counselors. And we've had last summer, 2 of our grandkids were primary campers, and both made decisions that week. So
the first time we sent my son off to camp,
we don't want to go
he
there.
left with an entire
Nothing.
wardrobe, but he came back with nothing.
So when your dad told me that, and what it was is the counselors were cleaning up their room,
They
and
cleaned
he
up.
had put it in a black garbage bag.
Yeah,
His
he
clothes,
put all
you
his
know,
dirty
yeah,
clothes in
there.
a black garbage bag. Good
And
thinking, son.
Throw it out, and of course the dumpster was like 10 minutes down the road being emptied, and the truck's on the road when it's like, oh no. And I said, that's Dr. Davis's grandson. I said, now I got to call Matt. That was the worst phone call I ever made, you know. I said, so I think we sent a couple Camp Chetek sweatshirts.
Yeah, he's well
shirts
outfitted. But no, we love Camp Chetek. It's a wonderful ministry, and you've done a tremendous job against a lot of the odds, so to speak. God has prevailed, and his good hand of blessing has just been on your life and your work. You're the alumnus of the year at Maranatha, and I wonder, give you a chance to reflect on that a little bit. You come pretty regularly, it seems a couple times a year, to recruit and to minister to the college students, and every time you come back, it's like a reunion. Camp staff, whether people who are on our staff now that have been blessed by the ministry of Camp Chetek. So I wonder if you could reflect on that partnership with Maranatha and your long history here.
Well, the Lord brought both my wife and I here in 1978 as freshmen, and so we got to enjoy the Dr. Cedarholm era. She actually worked for Mrs. Cedarholm when I was in grad school.
Cool.
For a year. And then obviously being in Watertown, and then as the Lord took us to camp, Micah was actually a sophomore in his sophomore year. Matthew was graduating from the academy, so he came in as a freshman, Micah then as a junior. And then my wife homeschooled the kids, and they all ended up coming to Maranatha. It's interesting because I went through pastoral, okay? But my boys watching me now at camp having to coordinate a $500,000 budget, they all added a business major to their degree because that was going to be part of life, you know, and it's been helpful to all of them, you know. But as I finished here, a couple went on to seminary, but they just, you know, fell, you know, it was neat to see Maranatha impact not only my wife and me, but then all 6 of our children. And in fact, I think when we put the stones up there, we put which ones, their wives were also from Maranatha.
Nice.
And because Micah married Renee, who is a graduate, and Matthew married Julie, who is a graduate of the grad school, and Mark and Rachel. Mm-hmm. And then Luke married Anna. She was from Ambassador, but they met at camp, and you know, so. And then Marissa, she started out at Wolf Mountain. Right. You guys did that Bridge to Campus program.
California.
So 2.5 years that she was out at Wolf Mountain, and then she transferred here, and Corey Faffey encouraged her in the business side of things and accounting, so she ended up becoming a CPA.
Yeah, incredible.
And working with Corey today.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing?
And Mitchell finished up here, and so it's just neat to see the impact there. Of course, you know, my wife and I enjoy coming back to Watertown. Of course, our son Mark lives in Watertown, and Matthew lives in Sun Prairie, and Mitch over in Madison, Marissa, and Count. So some of the kids are here, which is a blessing. But, you know, the connection with Maranatha, the staff, obviously now we come back and, you know, you always know when we have our table up there, it's always people around it just because, you know, we got 24 students that are coming from Maranatha, and they have their friends here. I attribute a lot this year, I think, to where we are is because of our summer staff and the recruiting they did for us. You know, they're our best recruiters.
Sure.
But coming back and still, you know, talking to some of the Maranatha people that we know, there's not a lot of teachers left here from when I was here. You know. But, you know, getting to know some of the new ones, you know, even seeing like Tim McPhillips come back, you know.
Yeah, it's amazing to see the cycle of that.
To see him here now, excited about his ministry here and what God's doing. And,
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to come and reminisce a little bit, but to reflect upon God's goodness in your own life. And I can't wait to see what lies ahead in that journey as you faithfully serve Him. That's our goal, just faithfully serving one day at a time, helping others achieve that same outcome in their lives. And, that's been your ministry, whether it's in the mode of youth pastor or the mode of camp or the mode of father and grandfather. The mission is the same. And so I appreciate that so much. Thanks for taking the time.
Great. We appreciate you guys, and I feel like we've got to continue to work together.
Amen.
Pray for Maranatha that they'll continue to produce young people for serving the Lord, and love to be able to give them an avenue to do that. And so praise the Lord for that. So
Camp Chetek, highest endorsement. Let's go.
Okay.
Amen.
Great.
Thank you for listening to On Mission, a podcast produced by Maranatha Baptist University. Maranatha is different. In a world turned upside down, boldly standing for Christ certainly draws attention. Christian young people need godly mentors who will affirm their faith and build on the foundation laid by their parents and pastors. That is the Maranatha difference. While secular colleges seem devoted to destroying the faith of their students, MBU provides students with a nurturing environment to study, practice and grow their faith, and develop lifelong relationships with Christian friends. Maranatha can prepare you for whatever vocation God is calling you to pursue. Our academic programs are built upon the timeless foundation of God's Word and taught by loving faculty who invest personally in the lives of every student. Maranatha is different, and that's a good thing. Find out more at mbu.edu. And for information about our podcast guests and to listen to all the previous episodes, visit mbu.edu/podcast. Join us again next week as we examine what keeps leaders on mission.